Oh, welcome in to the Baseball Insiders. I'm Adam Weinrib alongside Robert Murray. You fine folks have no idea how close you were to getting breaking news live on the pod before the tweet. The tweet, though, is out. Cole Hamels, San Diego Padres. John Heyman just got it 14 seconds ago. You beat him because you got it out right before we started the countdown. Welcome to the show. We got a packed slate. We're going to be talking Frankie Montas. We're going to be talking about Michael Wacha's insane contract. Christian Javier, the Astros locking up somebody, and spring training beginning, hearing some not so great things from Brian Reynolds and Corbin Burns. We already had a packed show, and now we've got a breaking minor league signing. How are you doing on this beautiful Thursday, my man?
Dude, it has been absolute chaos today on my end. A lot of phone calls, a lot of good phone calls. But I also did not expect Cole Hamels. Like, that legitimately came out of the blue. So what a way to start the show today, buddy.
It's fun. It's fun to do fun things.
Oh, you're darn right.
Cole Hamels, obviously Phillies legend. We love him. Is going to reset the clock on his Hall of Fame consideration, I guess, which is probably the weirdest part of this. Probably not going to make Cooperstown at this juncture. His career it was not the same guy after 2016 with the Rangers. 2017 season at the age of 33, lost that strikeout touch. He struck out 200 in 203rd innings in that year with the Rangers, and then just 105 in 148 the next season. Bounced between the Rangers and Cubs. He's a Cub for a couple of years. He's an Atlanta Brave for one start during the shortened 2020 season. And now back in baseball with the Padres, who we talked already on the last show, have done an incredible job fleshing out their depth in the rotation. Nick Martinez is the sixth guy. Michael Wacha is now there for either 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. I don't really understand what that is. Cole Hamels is obviously not going to be under pressure to carry any segment of the San Diego Padres season. If he is, something has gone really wrong, but pretty cool return for a hometown boy to go back to San Diego.
No, it absolutely is a really cool deal for Hamels. And for the Padres, it's just them continuing to add pitching depth. And that's been a key to their offseason, is they just want to have as much pitching depth as they can, because, throughout an entire 162 game season, injuries are going to happen. And they've experienced that in years past. They want to avoid that. And with Hamels, you really don't know what you're going to get considering that injury history that he's had. But when he's healthy, or when he's been healthy in the past, which obviously it's been a while ago, he's been an impactful pitcher. So maybe you can get somebody who pitches out of the bullpen, maybe a spot start if he does make it to the major league roster. But from an organizational perspective, at least, it improves their depth. If it works out, great. If not, you can cut ties with no real problem there at all.
Also, notably, one of 2 2008 World Champion Phillies who is married to Survivor contestants. Cole Hamels' wife, Heidi, was on Survivor Amazon, and Kyle Kendrick's wife, Stephanie LaGrossa, was on 2 seasons of Survivor. And recently on Peacock's The Traders. So 2 Phillies teammates, 2 Survivor women. I think that's worth mentioning. And you can add that to the tweet if you want to add that to the breaking news tweet.
So I'll add that to the tweet right now. I'll just go done. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Elon.
That's the kind of insight that only you can get on the Baseball Insiders and from Adam Weinrib. Like that's
it's coming right from the top of the dome, because we didn't have Cole Hamels on the rundown today. We weren't going to talk about Cole Hamels, and then he signed. So I gotta give you these nuggets.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Like this is exactly how it played out. As we were about to go live, and all of a sudden, I look at my texts and I get a message saying Cole Hamels to the Padres. And I ask Adam, I was like, is this out? And he's like, I haven't seen anything. And all of a sudden I put the tweet out, and here we are talking about Cole Hamels to open up the show. It's like, it's unbelievable. Baseball, you can't really predict it, can you?
No. And I mean, not only was it not out, but no one had tweeted, as far as I can tell, no one had tweeted the name Cole Hamels in 6 hours in any way. Now, maybe Elon Musk was messing with my search function. Maybe he was just blowing up everywhere else, but not on my feed. But it dead silent in the Cole Hamels market until you launched that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I came dangerously close to tweeting Coke Hamels. So that would have brought back nice memories from the winter meetings this year.
That's why not everybody can do what you do. And that's why everybody out there who is subscribed to the Baseball Insiders. Maybe you're here because you're subscribed. Thanks for coming. Highly recommend it. If you're here and you're not subscribed because you saw the Cole Hamels news, you just had to hop on the live stream, welcome. You'll be here for a very exciting show today, but hopefully you smash that subscribe button and stick around for quite a while. We're also on all podcast platforms, but most importantly, we're live streaming Mondays and Thursdays, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we got a lot to take down today. I didn't even get to do I'm wearing a Cardinals hat. My preferred open, I was going to pay tribute to Tim McCarver, an all-timer and a man who inspired me on my broadcast. I'm obviously not a broadcaster, but on my journey in baseball. He was the voice of my childhood, the voice of a generation. Passed away, we got word about an hour and a half ago. Wanted to pay tribute to him. I didn't know we were going to start with Cole Hamels, but a very, very meaningful life McCarver led. The broadcasts have not been the same without him, I would say. I don't know if you feel the same, but losing Buck and McCarver from baseball was a lot like losing Buck and Aikman to the ESPN. But at least they're still on the air, though. Losing McCarver was a big one, and I miss him very much.
Yeah, Adam, that was very well said. And yeah, that's a huge blow for baseball. A huge blow for everybody that follows the sport and is in the sport. And Ken Rosenthal wrote a really good column today on The Athletic about it and about Tim and like what it was like working with him. So I highly recommend reading that. But all my thoughts go out to Tim, his family, and everybody that knew him.
Yes, no more needs to be said, but one of the all-time greatest. Let's start running down the list of things that have broken over the past week or so, things we have to address. We'll talk injuries, we'll talk disenchantment. The one thing I don't want to miss, though, is because we forgot it on the last episode, Christian Javier, the latest to sign this below-market extension with the Houston Astros. They announced the Yordan Alvarez deal a long time ago, but he had his presser today. So there are all these press photos of Yordan Alvarez out there. They also locked down Christian Javier for just 5 years and $64 million. I think it sometimes doesn't get talked about enough that he threw 2 combined no-hitters last year, including one in the World Series. Christian Javier is at the top of his game. He is somebody who was signed at an absolute bargain out of Latin America. And the man who signed him went on to leave the organization, go to the Marlins this offseason. But he famously sort of managed to put together, without a big budget, Framber, Christian Javier, Luis Garcia, and they're just stacked. There's that never-ending pipeline in Houston. He sticks around, but are you at all surprised that he bought in and he chose to buy out some free agent years with super obviously this deal is backloaded, but it's not as much money as he could have made if he'd waited to the open market?
Yeah, I was surprised that they did a deal now, but I also was not, because Houston, they hired Dana Brown away from the Atlanta Braves. And we've talked about this plenty on this show, and we all know how much the Braves like to extend their young players. And that's exactly what Dana Brown is doing now with Houston. They did it with Christian Javier. I thought he obviously would have gotten more money if he was on the open market, especially with how he's pitching now and the kind of upside that he has. But he's still going to reach free agency at a really young age. So he's still going to have another opportunity to cash in, especially if he stays healthy. I also don't think that this is going to mark the end for Houston. Dana Brown went on the record today and said that he's even made it clear to Jose Altuve's agent that he wants him to be in Houston for the rest of his career. Whether or not that ultimately happens remains to be seen, but Brown has not been shy at all about his desire to extend these young players. He even told Jim Crane, he even told the media that Jim Crane better have his pocket ready or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was just like, whoa. And I even asked somebody earlier today on the phone, it was just like, have you ever heard a GM talk this openly about it? And his response was never. And I personally like it. I think it's really good for baseball, just having teams spend like this. And who knows, maybe we have an Astros Foundation before too long.
If the Astros Foundation, I would accept it only if they're relentlessly dedicated to bettering the game of baseball, to leaving baseball in a better place than where the 2017 Astros found it. I would accept that foundation, doing charity work to increase their reputation. But yeah, there's a lot of young stars in Houston. And it makes more sense that they would lay the foundation and keep those guys now that they have a GM in place. And if Jim Crane is willing to do it, then more power to him. You're right. It's totally good for the game. Let's move on to maybe some areas where the players in the front office and the GM and the owners don't see quite so eye to eye. It seems like it's harmonious in Houston, not so much in Milwaukee. And I'm glad that we have this. I'm glad that the show is going up after these comments came out, because I was so excited to talk to you about these, and you reached out to me too, so make sure we got this on the docket. I said, yeah, believe me, I put it on the docket. Corbin Burns reports to camp and speaks to the media today, and it's basically the platonic, and it's every fan is worried when their player goes to an arbitration hearing that they're going to leave with their reputation damaged and their relationship to the club damaged. But you rarely see a clear example of that happening. Dellin Betances with the Yankees a couple of years ago went through this. They apparently went after him for not being able to sell tickets as an 8th inning reliever. Cool. But Corbin Burns sort of went on the warpath, talked about how he spent his Valentine's Day flying back and forth to haggle over under $750,000 with the Brewers. He lost his case. He talked about how you learn about how the team values you. And he said, quote, "There's no denying that the relationship is definitely hurt from what transpired." If you're the Brewers, how do you justify doing that to somebody like Burns?
I don't have a good answer. I really don't. I have a lot of thoughts about this one. It reminds me so much of what happened with Josh Hader. The Brewers had a superstar young pitcher, could not agree on a salary. I believe it was in 2020. Took him to an arbitration hearing, and it damaged that relationship to the point where Hader was not used the same after that hearing. Before that, he could be a multi-inning reliever. After that, he was strictly a 1-inning reliever. He would not pitch more than that. And ultimately, he was traded. Obviously, like a lot of that stemmed from salary reasons, because the Brewers they're not a team that can pay a reliever $15+ million a year. So they traded him last year. And you look at Burns, he is quite possibly the best young pitcher in baseball. You take him to an arbitration hearing over $750,000 or a little bit less than that. And you tell him to his face that he was a reason why they did not make the postseason last year. Among other things, you cause him to be away from his be away from his wife on Valentine's Day. I've been around Burns for years. I know how important his wife and his family is, and I'm sure that absolutely crushed him. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it in the end. We saw what happened with Josh Hader. It may very well, and even Burns was he did not hide his feelings about how he felt coming out of that hearing. I don't expect Burns to be traded now. I don't expect him to be traded this year. But that conversation is going to continue to grow probably after this year, with his salary going up. And are the Brewers going to be able to retain a player like that? It's going to be really tough, because they also have to worry about Willy Adames and Brandon Woodruff. But for right now, that relationship, it's hurt. It's impacted. Burns, to his credit, from everything that I've heard, is going to try to put it past him and try to continue. He's the ultimate competitor, is what he is. He'll try to put it past him. He'll move forward. He'll pitch. But I wonder what the consequences are going to look like in the future because of this.
Yeah, that's the natural follow. And you answered it, because you know what's coming. If you say this reminds me of the Josh Hader situation, and the Josh Hader trade basically felt predetermined from that point on. It took a while to get there, but we were all eyeing it, and everybody from the outside was saying, this Brewers team is in contention. They're really going to trade Josh Hader. Like, it's that much of a certainty. And then there he goes, finally, to the Padres last summer. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not at this year's deadline, but the natural follow-up is you sort of feel like this starts the train of making a Burns trade an inevitability, rather than reaching free agency and risking losing him for nothing. I mean, that's certainly my read on it.
And I think there's a lot of logic in what you're saying, because the Brewers, they did not want to lose Hader for nothing when he became so that's why they explored a trade and ultimately moved him to the Padres. Teams checked in on Burns quite a bit this offseason, and the Brewers were pretty adamant that they wanted to hold on to him. But if the Brewers do eventually make Burns available, which, as I said, it's not going to be now, would highly doubt midseason. I still think the end of the end of this season is when it becomes a little bit more possible. There's going to be plenty of teams interested, and you know how the Brewers too. They have a really good group of young pitchers. They have Burns, they have Brandon Woodruff, who, as I mentioned, also could use an extension. They have Freddie Peralta, who they did extend. Then they have Aaron Ashby, who they also extended too. He is going to miss a couple of months of the regular season. He is dealing with a shoulder injury. The team actually just announced it, but the indications that I got yesterday were not overly positive. So they're between hurting their relationship with Burns and the Aaron Ashby news today. This has not been a very good stretch for Brewers pitchers. Matt Arnold, when I talked to him yesterday, the Brewers GM, he did not rule out an outside addition. They have internal depth where they can end up where they could try to solve that. But boy, I wonder if they could end up exploring a veteran player on a minor league contract just to make up for Ashby's absence here.
You and I have been looking at the Brewers all offseason too, just sort of saying, Willy Adames, teams interested in a shortstop. Are you talking to them? Are you looking at him? Where is he on your radar? What do you think it would take? How do you think how far off the rails do you think this Brewer season would have to go before they entertain doing something like that mid-season?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't really know a number or a spot in the standings, but it would have to go just a wire for this to happen, or for that to happen. Boy, I'll tell you, I know the fan frustration now in Milwaukee, and how upset they are, and rightfully so, after this Burns hearing. Boy, if they ended up starting the season ice cold and then moving one of those players, that could end up being, oh boy, I'm glad I moved to Scottsdale. Let's just say that. Goodness me.
Goodness gracious. Well, yeah, I mean, that's, hey, cost benefit analysis of taking someone to an arbitration fight over less than $1 million is exactly what we're seeing here. So maybe next time you look in the books for that $748,000 and you go, oh, I left some under the couch cushion. I guess I could just pay that to Corbin Burns instead of devaluing him in the public square. But congrats on your win, Milwaukee Brewers. That's a big win for you.
$750,000.
Yeah, that's massive. You could install some reinforcements on Bernie Brewer's slide, probably. Maybe you get another tap at the craft beers of the world stand in right center. I mean, the possibilities are simply endless. Then on the flip side, your ace is now furious. But hey.
Yeah, God, I'll tell you, if I was running that team, I would not have done that. Boy, not good. But, and that also, one more thought on this is, I have no issue with players in this case fighting for more money, and I'm a huge proponent of players trying to get as much as they can, and that's why we've seen more and more players go to an arbitration hearing. It doesn't. I feel like it should happen more, or where teams don't. I try to figure out how I want to explain that. But long story short is I don't have an issue with Burns trying to get as much as he thinks he deserves, because, as I said, he's the best young pitcher in baseball. Go get your dough. So, it's really unfortunate that this happened.
Yeah, I think you're right. These are the parameters that are in place for players to do that. So if a player has to go to an arbitration hearing to get that contract they deserve, then by all means go for it. But it feels like there's got to be a better system than having a knockdown, drag-out fight in front of a neutral arbiter, as well as maybe the team should potentially just reconsider if they feel like dragging out this process. Sticking in the NL Central, Corbin Burns was not the only player whose future is up for grabs to report with an interesting thing to say about their contract status. Brian Reynolds reported to Pirates camp, made a trade request this offseason with 3 years of team control left before he would hit free agency. So you can't force anyone in to doing anything when you have that much time before free agency. Even Kevin Durant did not force Brian Reynolds. Kevin Durant asked for a trade, didn't get one for a while. Then he got one. Brian Reynolds asked for a trade. He's still sitting there. But there were rumors before his arrival. Did he rescind the request? Are the Pirates really asking for all that much? Why haven't we heard any movement on that front? And Reynolds got in front of the media yesterday and said his preference is to extend in Pittsburgh, but the trade request still stands, and neither side has moved at all from their initial ask. That would leave the Pirates between 76 and 80 million, and Reynolds between 130 and 134 million over the course of a long-term deal. He said he does not want to break the bank, shatter the record for the position. He also doesn't want to sign some sort of team-friendly deal. It was what stood out most to you, because what stood out most to me was that he can want to extend as much as he wants to, but both teams seem to be at the same line in the sand they were earlier in the offseason when the request was initially made.
Yeah, Reynolds obviously requested that trade, and the Pirates immediately, their response was that they weren't going to trade him, that they want to build around Brian Reynolds. And that request, which, as John Heyman reported at the time, it stemmed from a lowball contract extension offer. It would have made him the highest paid Pirates player in history, but that's not a very high bar to clear. That's $72 million. I believe it's $72 million by Brian Hayes. And Reynolds thinks he's worth a lot more than that, and rightfully so. He's a very good player, a really good player, and a really talented young outfielder who's cheap, controllable. I mean, that's a lot of what these teams covet. And the Pirates, they got a lot of interest in Reynolds, but their asking price was also extremely high, and that always made a trade more unlikely than not. And I still don't see any way that Brian Reynolds is traded before opening day unless something shocking happens. He's going to be a Pirate. Maybe they're ultimately able to work out a long-term deal that would require Bob Nutting to really open up his wallet and expand payroll. But I also think that they should. And if you look at what the Pirates are building, I've said this from the beginning of the offseason, I really, 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 really like what the Pirates are building. And I can't believe those are words coming out of my mouth. They have a good young nucleus. You have Brian Reynolds, you have O'Neal Cruz, you have Brian Hayes, who's a really good defender at third base. We're still trying to figure out what he is offensively. You have other good young players on that team. You have a good veteran base now with Andrew McCutchen. You got G-Man Choi. They signed a bunch of, and they also got Rich Hill. I got to mention Rich Hill. And you also look at their farm system too. Their farm system is it's in a good spot right now. So give them another year, and you also have Brian Reynolds as a huge part of that roster. You're looking pretty good here, and that's why I think they should extend. They should extend Reynolds because he is the key part of what their next era is going to be. I don't know whether or not they're going to be able to offer him a contract that he wants, but they should. And for the Pirates' sake, I hope they do.
That does make me think. You like the Pirates offseason, you like the Pirates plan, and the best version of that plan includes Reynolds long-term, which makes me think that it is just ownership standing in the way of this thing getting done. So we have a question, saying what's the bigger roadblock? Is it, the team's offer? Is it the years, or is it the AAV, or is it the total money? What do you think? Do you think this is ownership putting a foot down and saying we're not going over this record-setting sum, or is this just a disagreement between everybody over the value of the player?
I don't necessarily know what it is. I don't know. I don't know if it's ownership. It's obviously, each side has a difference in their value since they were so far apart. So perhaps that's the key reason, but I don't know. I'll have to do some more digging and see what I can uncover. But Yeah, that gap should be closed. I don't know what each side was seeking, or I don't know what Reynolds was seeking. I don't know what the Pirates are offering, but yeah, they should be a lot closer than they were. Let's just say that.
And while you're digging, make sure to get us photos of jacked Brian Hayes showing up to camp, because I am intrigued. I've not seen that yet. I've not seen yoked young Hayes, so I'll look that up as well.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's good insight there by Ethan Fisher. I had not seen that, so shout out to Ethan, who first reported in the Baseball Insiders chat that Brian Hayes is jacked.
That's the thing. Some people show up. Some people say they're in the best shape of their lives, and you're like, I don't think you really are. And some people, they are in the best shape of their lives, but it's relative because they were in horrible shape before, and now they're in fine shape. And it's like, well, yeah, but what does that really do for me? If Brian Hayes is like actually jacked, then like, yeah, we might have something here.
Oh, you absolutely might. And I'll tell you, like, it's good. Baseball is right around the corner when we're hearing about players being in the best shape of their lives. Like, yeah, baseball season is officially here, baby.
My two favorite articles are best shape of their life, which we're getting a ton of them, and best shape of their life's cousin, player looks completely different. We just got a Javier Baez tweet from the Tigers where he's got like a strip of white hair on his head. I don't know what that is, but that's not what he looked like the last time I saw him. And it's nice to see it. It's nice to see something different.
It is. It's refreshing. It cleanses the timeline because there's so much negativity nowadays. Now we're seeing, like, I look down on my Twitter feed now. Actually, this is kind of funny. We have a picture from Evan Grant of a pitcher throwing, and then there's a picture of Jonathan Gannon, which, ouch, as an Eagles fan, that still hurts. But anyways, I digress. There's been plenty of baseball on my timeline, which is always a welcome thing.
I'm seeing Brian, and it's between 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. Yeah, he looks big. Confirmed Ethan Fisher's report that Brian Hayes does look large.
Catching up on credit.
Yeah, catching up on credit. It's Coke Hamels to the Padres. Bird had that first. He also had Cole Hamels, and then on Brian Hayes being large. That's all you, Ethan. Thanks for letting us know. Before we get too far off the rails, let's talk about Yankees nonsense. Frankie Montas needs shoulder surgery. That became official yesterday. It was rumored prior. He was going to miss the first month or so of the season, building back up in his throwing program. Some will recall he came to the Yankees last summer as their big trade deadline acquisition, having already battled shoulder issues beforehand, which is why obviously a burner asked, is this the same injury that caused Montas to miss time just before the trade deadline? I don't think we know that. I don't think anybody knows that, but it does make the situation more uncomfortable because you got to trust Brian Cashman and the Yankees front office to do their due diligence. And if somebody's cleared for takeoff and cleared for trade, then you have to trust that that's going to happen. And whether it's the same issue or not, we know there was a foundational shoulder problem before the trade, and there still is now. And he's getting a scope. He's either going to miss all of this season or most of it, depending on how bad that is and what it shows and what the surgeons find. Looking back, where does this fall on the bad Brian Cashman trade pantheon, and what do we know about the fallout of this deal?
This is among the worst deals that Brian Cashman has ever made. I feel like that's a pretty safe thing to say. I think it was Joel Sherman in the Post who kind of compared this to the Carl Pavano trade years ago. Which good comp. That's this trade has been nothing short of a disaster for the Yankees because that was their move along with Andrew Benintendi last year of going. Would you say that's an all-in move?
I thought so. I mean, they wanted Luis Castillo. The fans wanted Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo was going to cost Anthony Volpe. Then I think everybody sort of backed off. They really believe in him. And the fans do too. So the fans are not surrendering a position player prospect like that for a pitcher of any kind. It's going to make fans nervous. If you don't have somebody else in the pipeline you're equally comfortable with. So I think people were excited to get Montas. He's the second choice last summer. They did not have to surrender one of their top 3 position players. Waldachuk is the top 100 prospect, goes out there. JP Sears and Luis Medina. But 10 starts, a 6.35 ERA, and then a missed second season of control is as bad as it gets.
Yeah, and like as you were saying that, I had a really interesting hypothetical go through my head. I don't know if this has been speculated on, but this is something that just popped into my head. And if it's idiotic, just tell me. But
I will.
so the Yankees, they obviously acquired Josh Donaldson last year. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't done that and they still had all that payroll room available, they could have signed Carlos Correa, which then would have made Anthony Volpe more expendable in this scenario, at least. Do you then trade Volpe, but instead of getting Montas, do you get Luis Castillo? And then last season looks totally different. That's a huge what if. I don't like, am I wrong for thinking that?
No, you're 100% right. The permutations are endless, right? You could also clear up that payroll space and, make that Castillo trade a last year's deadline. This offseason, if you don't have that payroll space, you can sign a Verlander instead of counting on Frankie Montas, maybe not quite, but Verlander Rodon's pretty exciting. They also had a wildly transformative trade deadline last year where they add Montas to the rotation, trade Jordan Montgomery to the Cardinals for Harrison Bader, a deal that I think Yankee fans are more excited about now than they were when it was done, but also a lot of moving parts. Add a pitcher, lose one, which led to speculation they were going to trade Gleyber Torres for Pablo Lopez. That doesn't work out, but if that had worked out, you have the infield logjam solved this year. You can use Volpe. You can start him at second base instead of starting him at AAA, and you have the Montas injury, and you can shake it off and say we still have Pablo Lopez as our fifth starter. A lot of things that could have gone down that didn't because of the way last year's trade deadline shook out, and it was full of I just think the Yankees got too cute by a factor of like one or two there. Like blockbuster trades, sure, but then they're giving away depth, but then they're not making a corresponding move. It's a lot of weirdness, and you get what you give, and now you have an injured Frankie Montas.
You do, and it's going to be really interesting to see exactly how Brian Cashman overcomes this.
Hello, everybody. We may be undergoing some technical difficulties is how that word is pronounced. But Robert will be back on the stream shortly. This happens from time to time. In the meantime, while you're here with me, please subscribe to the Baseball Insiders live on YouTube. We're here 3:30 Eastern every Monday and Thursday, and that's going to be consistent for the remainder of the offseason and during the regular season. Maybe we'll be around a little more often during the regular season because we're going to be here surrounding big moments. So you'll have us whenever you need us, right? It's not always going to be Cole Hamels breaking a couple of minutes before we're scheduled to go on, but if there's a moment that requires it, and we're ready and available, we'll also be going live. So you're only going to get those alerts if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You will find us here at those designated times, but we will find more times to be available as well. And follow Robert, of course, on Twitter because he's the one who sends you the link. He's back.
I'm back, and I that was not a breaking news kind of thing. That was my computer just randomly shut off. So hopefully I didn't just tease anybody in the chat here.
I don't think so, but we didn't lose a single viewer, so I feel good about that.
That makes me feel much better. I apologize to everybody for that. And we were talking about the Yankees before. So sorry about that. I know Adam's precious Yankees. He doesn't want to miss any Yankees talk.
I don't want to talk about these clowns. I mean, Frankie Montas. The problem is that bottom line, and I don't know if this is fair or not. I don't know what the MRI said last summer. I don't know how his injury progressed. I don't know when it got from bad to worse. I don't know any of these things, right? But Brian Cashman is paid to know these things. And the general public knew he had a shoulder issue before the trade. So Brian Cashman knew that as well. He knew the extent of it. I didn't. It was on him and his lieutenants to figure out whether this was a good deal to make or not. And clearly it was a mistake. Also, some eyebrows being raised at the surgery being had on February 21st when the injury was from June. I raised my eyebrows there as well. It would have been much less of a bummer to receive this notification on November 8th saying that Frankie Montas needs his shoulder scoped and he'll be back by June than to receive it on the eve of spring training and just learn his season is already over.
Yeah, because if you learn about that a lot earlier, you know exactly, or you have time to prepare and try to end up adding players to overcome that absence. And now you're left with, we're at the stage of the offseason where Cole Hamels is signing. And it leaves the Yankees in a really difficult position. Who's available on the free agent market? Who is possibly available on the trade market? I mean, the Twins, they have an abundance of players who are signed in the rotation to 1-year contracts. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Sonny Gray is not going to be among those options for the Yankees.
Well, at least the Yankees don't have Larry Rothschild anymore. He's gone. So you never know.
See, it may be. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, maybe they explore something with the Twins. I mean, there's going to be, I'm sure there would be an abundance of trade options made available throughout spring. So you never know there, but navigating this one is going to be a huge challenge for Cashman. I don't really know exactly how we'll go about doing it. But we do know one thing, that the Frankie Montas trade was a colossal failure. The Benintendi thing Benintendi last year, but getting him, that turned out to be a whiff because he was hurt basically right after the trade. Montas, disaster. I liked their moves at the time, but oh boy, yeah, not to quote Joe Girardi, not what you want.
And Scott Efros lost to Tommy John surgery. Now you can't predict Tommy John surgery, but it's another one that it's not going to pay off for quite a while. I think that's the answer. We liked him at the time. None of them worked. Period.
No.
And now that we have the contract details for a guy like Michael Wacha, who's signed for just $4 million in 2023, but it's a 4-year, $26 million deal, $16 million club options in 24 and 25. Our guy AJ Preller is inventing new ways to sign people, and I think that's interesting. But the Yankees only have to clear another $1 million to get a guy like Wacha. Do they do that if they know Montas needs surgery a month and a half ago? And this is also just a nice jumping off point to talk about your boy AJ Preller's contract negotiating skills. I don't know what this deal is. And Ken Rosenthal tweeted the details today. I still don't know what this deal is. It's insane.
I'll tell you. So before I dive into what the Wacha deal means for the Yankees and the Padres, that structure, that contract was very, very, very eerily similar to Chad Green's deal with the Blue Jays. Mm-hmm. I even texted someone earlier. I'm like, is it just me or does that look a lot like Chad Green's deal? And it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. So I think that's where maybe that inspiration came from. But maybe the Yankees would have been able to do a 1 for 5, but also Wacha wanted, he wanted a multi-year deal. And Dennis Lin of The Athletic today wrote that Wacha actually was seeking a 2-year for $30 million contract. So that could have been tough to accomplish there for the Yankees on a short-term 1-year contract. But all it took was AJ Preller to do what AJ Preller does and get active. And it was funny yesterday. I was at the manager / GM media day here in Phoenix. And I looked at AJ Preller and I'm like, he's going to go sign someone. And lo and behold, it turned out to be Michael Wacha and now Cole Hamels. It's the man doesn't sleep. And I'll tell you, if I was a Padres fan, I'd be freaking excited. Having a GM who is that active, who from all I can tell does not sleep, is in his spare time just plays pickup basketball. He's very good at it, by the way, from everything that I've heard. He's another thing another person that makes baseball a really, really, really great game. Is you just never know what you're going to get.
So if you were there at the summit yesterday watching Preller stalk around making his moves, does that mean that you were there for the rule change press conference and all the new bases versus old bases stuff and everybody walking around taking a picture of the gigantic new bases? Because if so, very jealous. That's an all-time, you talk about beat writer photos of people zooming in from very far away to just put a blurry guy. The bases comparison was, everybody had that. It was great to see.
Oh, it was awesome. Unfortunately, I was not there,
Hmm.
which it's a very sad thing. But I did see a picture of Jeff Passan on the mound. He was like, it looked like he was about to pitch, which I didn't expect that. That just was a really random thing that popped up on my Twitter feed yesterday. I can't remember who tweeted that, but whoever did, good job. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from like the new rules or the bases being bigger, and this is something that I've heard from numerous people throughout the industry, is that there's going to be more of a value placed on base stealers, and it's going to happen more often. Those players are going to become increasingly valuable because players are going to be more inclined to steal, because it's going to be slightly easier to steal. And yeah, I'm curious to see how it's impacted, one, at the trade deadline, but also two, in free agency, like how much of a value teams place on those kind of players.
I'm intrigued too. I got to say, I'm worried about veteran relievers with the pitch clock. I'm not worried about most pitchers. I'm certainly not worried about the young ones who came up with it. I'm worried about the Kenley Janssens and the Aroldis Chapmans of the world. Kenley Jansen taking some time off from the WBC specifically to practice the new pitch clock and taking that breath and adjusting his pace from what he's become so used to over the years. That is going to be a really odd adjustment to start off with. But the new bases should encourage sign stealing.
Hey, it's still in your head.
They should encourage sign stealing because there's more room to put cameras in a giant base. So you should be able to get a good angle on the catchers. No, I don't know. But it should encourage stealing, and it should also, the pickoff rules. If you go over twice and you're not allowed to go over again, it's going to give the batter a chance to get a head start. And those two pickoff throws better be your best pickoff throws. You can't be going half-ass to first base and realizing that you wasted one, and the runner's looking over you like he just tossed the lollipop. You can't even do this. You can only do it one more time. Yeah. I'm gonna go.
Exactly, and I'll tell you too, because this is something that I got ripped over last year. Is I never understood why fans booed when a team or when a pitcher threw over to first base to check a run. Like, I think that's just stupid. But now, I mean, I think there's more of a reason for it, especially because you gotta actually, as you said, you're not gonna throw a lollipop over there. You're not gonna waste an opportunity. Yeah. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see how this all impacts the game, whether it does or not. But I think it's for the best, especially this one, because I know those would just really kind of, I don't know, they just felt pointless at times. Although there's always strategy behind everything that they do.
Kind of. There's a reason John Lester retired. Yeah, go.
See that? Hey, there you go. Well, as soon as this rule is implemented, John Lester is out of the game. But the Brewers have released a statement on Corbin Burns, by the way.
Oh, wow, really?
And should I read it off right now?
Please.
The arbitration process always presents uncomfortable situations for both the player and the club involved. It is never easy to present a case against a member of the Brewers family. I'd like to reiterate that we view Corbin as one of the leaders of our franchise and value him as an elite talent in the game. Corbin is a major contributor to the organization, both on and off the field, and we look forward to another outstanding season from him in 2023. And this is my translation. We screwed up. That's exactly what, yeah. And yeah, that's, oh boy.
What screamed we screwed up in there was them explicitly saying what they value him as, because we knew in the wake of him speaking out that they must have had a severe disagreement on each other's value. He probably pointed to the scoreboard and said, look at my Cy Young results and look at my numbers. And I don't know what they said back, but clearly there was a value argument there. And so they went out of their way in the apology statement to say, we value him as a leader of a championship contender. You better.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, it sounds, or believe it or not, Adam, a franchise-altering pitcher is actually a good thing, and not a bad thing. So who could have seen that coming?
No. Just check that shoulder first before you surrender assets for one.
Who could you be talking about?
I have no idea. I assume they didn't look. Just Google Frankie Montas. One more thing before we sign off. Mark Powell, that's what he was saying. I feel like I got to call it back because last show we were talking about the Dodgers and Alex Reyes, and you were sort of skirting around like, hey, maybe the Dodgers and somebody else. We don't know. Maybe we're thinking about doing that again. We did have a Zach Britton showcase this week, and the commenters are asking about it because Cubbies are looking for a lefty reliever. Johnny is asking, I know the Cubs were there at the Zach Britton showcase. I know the Dodgers were there. Giants, Angels, Mets, and Rangers are the other teams. We've heard about the Mets and Britton forever because of Buck Showalter. And I guess he wants to get another chance to leave him in the bullpen in the most important game of the year. But that's a team we've long heard their interest. Now the Dodgers and Cubs make a ton of sense, and we're getting the picture filled out a little bit. Was that what you were hinting at? And what do we know about Britton after that showcase?
That is precisely what I was hinting at. And I had written a column on Fansided explaining 3 teams that I thought made sense for Britton, aka these are 3 teams that are in on Zach Britton, and it was the Dodgers, it was the Angels. I don't know if they're still in after signing Matt Moore, and it was the Rangers. And lo and behold, there's some other teams that showed up there just to check in exactly where he's at. I oddly enough did not hear any reports coming out of it, so I would imagine no news is good news. That's at least how I'm kind of viewing it. But interesting. I'm getting a very interesting phone call right now. I will take that in a little bit.
Take it right now. Yeah, we are. I will sign us off if you want.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. If you could.
I will. Mute yourself before you take it. That is it for this edition of the Baseball Insiders. You guys are the best. Thanks for joining us every Monday and Thursday, 3:30 Eastern. As always, I went through this spiel in the middle. You can like and subscribe to the channel, to the videos. As Bert always says, that's what puts food on our table. He says it better than me because he doesn't stumble over put. He says puts. But another great episode from you, Robert. And thanks, everybody, for showing up. Thanks for the comment section for absolutely killing it. We will see you next week.
See you later, everybody. Thank you very much.